morning. I'm Matt Edwards, and this is Thursday Night Live over here on the voicelessons.com channels. You can catch us on Twitch, YouTube, or over on Facebook on our Facebook page. Be sure to subscribe, follow, like. We go live every Thursday night to either take questions from singers, to take questions from teachers, or to bring on special guests just to talk about the singing voice in general. I'm usually joined by co-hosts Mike Elson, who's the founder of voicelessons.com. He's not able to be here tonight, so I'm doing a solo show. I will try to get to your live questions as much as I can. If you're watching live, you have questions that come up, drop them in the chat. We will try to get all of them if we can. And we have a special topic tonight, which is crossing over from classical to musical theater and popular styles. So we've been getting quite a few questions about this coming in. And we wanted to kind of just group them together and take on this topic a little bit just by itself tonight. So the first question that comes in is from Jennifer. And she asks, can anyone learn to sing rock? And the answer is yes. The thing is, though, is that there's a big misconception about what that means. And that's why people think sometimes the answer is no. You see, a lot of times when people mention rock and roll, the first thing that comes to their mind is like, you know, Def Leppard or Metallica or Led Zeppelin or Janis Joplin, or Heart, or, you know, Pat Benatar. And they're these big, iconic rock voices that are really powerful. And so that can scare some singers away if they're like, well, I don't have a gritty voice like those artists, or I don't have, you know, the same range as those artists. But you have to remember that there are lots of other rock performers that go all the way back to the 50s. I mean, Elvis was more of a baritone. He wasn't a tenor. If we go back and we look at some of the early, like even folk rock singers, Janis Ian, and, you know, of course, Carole King, you listen to their style, they weren't always belty. They had a really nice mix. And so, you know, you have to find your subgenre, because rock is really at this point in time an umbrella term. You know, true rock and roll is really hard to define because there's always been all of these you know, breakoffs and offshoots. In fact, if you really look at Elvis Presley, he was really a lot more rockabilly when he got started. And, you know, up to today, then we have these, you know, thrash and, you know, hardcore metal bands. And that's rock and roll too. So what I would say to you, Jennifer, is yes, anybody can learn to sing rock that is, you know, conducive or productive with their voice. So you have to look at what your range is. You have to look at what your vocal qualities are, and then start seeking out artists who have similar voices to you, and then start singing that music, right? You can't just go like, I wouldn't want to go out and just try to sing Journey songs. That voice isn't anything like me. But Crash Test Dummies, that I can do. I've got a voice very similar to their lead singer. I can do some Pearl Jam and some Nirvana. I've got some grit when I get up high, and those fit me. But even with those songs, sometimes I take them down a whole step if I can, because they're just a little too high. And I think that's the other key thing here, is that you don't have to sing rock in its original key. If you're doing a cover version of a song, and especially if you're doing a different take on it, if you're mixing it up a little bit, you can absolutely change it up, change the range. You can even bring notes down and take notes up. You have a whole lot of freedom. And so if you're exploring rock in that way, then anybody can sing it. You could also, though, as a classical singer, you want to be aware that there are some different techniques you may not know. There are healthy ways to add a little pride into the sound. There's healthy ways to add a growl into the sound as well. And you need to learn what those are if you're going to start going down that road. As a classical singer, you've probably been trained to have really acoustically powerful vowels and long legato lines, and those are other things that you're going to have to learn about other approaches to when you jump into the rock song. I think we're going to talk about a few of those tonight, okay? But hopefully that answers your question, Jennifer. Again, you know, it's really about finding someone whose voice is similar to yours, starting by learning their songs, listening to that music, then finding artists who are similar to that artist, and just kind of going into this big, broad web to find music that you can sing. And then, of course, the best answer is to start writing your own songs, because then you can customize it to be exactly what you want. All right, so the next question comes from Miriam, and she is asking, what's the placement for belt? And this is a great question. I get asked this a lot. And the best placement for belt is the one that works for you. And I know that sounds very vague and like a non-answer, because it is. There is no singular placement for any singer. Everybody experiences placement a little differently. I was just working with one of my pro clients who tours all over the world performing big level gigs. And this person, we were making a simple sound of them humming through their nose, and they said they didn't feel it a lot. Whereas I have other students, when I use this humming through the nose, this to get a sense of airflow, they can feel all kinds of buzzy sensations. They're both making the exact same sound, and one client doesn't feel anything, and another one feels a whole tickle that almost makes them want to sneeze. Right? You can think about, people have like high pain thresholds, like, they get hit and it barely bothers them. Whereas you have somebody else who's really sensitive and just a little tap feels like they just got hit really hard. So my belief is that we see those same variances among singers. And that belief is based off of working with well over 1,000 singers in master classes and private lessons, and getting to interact and getting to hear how they experience their voice. Not everybody experiences forward placement at all. And then even within the subset of people who do experience forward placement, not all of them experience it the same way. So what is forward placement anyway? Well, this is a model here of the vocal tract. And the vocal tract model shows you that the vocal folds are down here, and then sound is emitted from them. And then this shows you the pathway for the sound to get out from your vocal folds. And as the sound leaves your vocal folds and travels through this vocal tract, it can go up into your nose or it can go out through your mouth if we lift this soft palate. And when you lift that soft palate up and the sound comes up through the vocal tract, it might start to vibrate some of these bones on the roof of your mouth. If you run your tongue across the top of your mouth, you're going to feel that it's hard on the surface and it gets soft. Well, when sound waves come up and they excite that bone on the roof of your mouth, those vibrations can travel around the rest of your skull. Okay, so here's a skull model. That's the roof of your mouth right there. And if you just look at where that comes and connects, that roof of the mouth connects right into this bone here. It goes all up around your eyes. It's your entire skull, right? So some people, when they get really powerful vibrations coming off of their vocal folds, they get a vowel quality that really helps amplify certain frequencies, they might feel a buzzy sensation right here in their cheekbones. Well, that makes sense. It's hitting the roof of the mouth, and actually that's one of the closest spots to feel it. So cheekbones, got it. Others will feel it in the nose, and if you look right there and look at that bone, it's right in the middle of the nose. It connects the roof of your mouth and goes all the way up into here, into your bridge. And for some singers, when they excite that roof of their mouth, the sensations travel up into here. Other singers end up feeling vibrations coming out of the top of their head or the top of their skull. And again, you have vibrations hitting a bone that's connected to all of that. And if that's how they experience their voice and the sound that they're getting is what they want and what audiences like, then that's authentic to them. So, Miriam, the key here is for you to discover what placement, or maybe it's not even placement, is right for you. And the only way to do that is to really get with an experienced teacher who's used to working with singers and helping them learn how to belt. You can start with a couple of little core sounds to compare classical resonance towards more of a belt resonance, so you can get a little idea of what you might feel. If we go with a classical sound, I want you to go whoo, whoo, and pay attention to what you notice, what vibratory sensations you feel. Whoo. Then what I want you to do is go meow, like a really angry cat. Meow, meow, meow. As you make that sound, you're going to notice a different set of vibrations. The differences between whoa and meow are placement sensations. And so we could say that classical is more on the ho side of the spectrum, and that really bright, ringy belt qualities are more side of the spectrum. But it's a spectrum, and that spectrum spans both genres, or all genres. You have belters who don't have as bright of a sound, but they've got a little bit more depth to their sound. You have a lot of opera singers who don't go for the whoo, they're not going for that sound, but they go for more of a projected speech sound just in a foreign language. And they're going to go more towards where that belt quality is. And then, of course, you have everything in the middle. And a lot of it, too, is determined by the thickness of your vocal folds. If you've got, smaller vocal folds, you're not going to necessarily produce the same power of the harmonics as if you have thicker vocal folds. And that's just what you were born with, right? That's a physiological difference amongst people. And what ends up happening is a lot of singers try to resist that. And when you resist what is, the suffering begins, right? You look at those notes that you really want to sing, and you just get so frustrated that you can't sing them. But you're worrying about, a certain set of notes and a certain set of songs, while there's like 2 million other songs for you to go explore. So that's a key thing with all of this for you who are thinking about crossing over, is when you first cross over, don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can do. And start this whole approach of this process of learning to dive into rock, thinking about discovering your own variations of these things. You don't want to find somebody else's placement, because if you do, you might end up sounding like them. You want to find your placement, the one that gives you vocal freedom and a vocal quality you like, and latch onto that for yourself. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Miriam. If you have any other questions or want us to take a listen, just send us a message. All right, the next question comes from Amy, and she says, am I supposed to breathe the same for musical theater as classical? All right, this is another no answer. Breathing is not universal. If you go and you read books, there's a book for classical singers called The Great Teachers on Great Singing. And as you read through there, you're going to find a whole variety of opinions about breathing in the classical world. So these are stars like Marilyn Horne is in there, Placido Domingo's in there, Luciano Pavarotti's in there. This is the best of the best. And you listen to them talk about their voice, and it's very different, right? And especially when it comes to breath. There is another book called A Spectrum of Voices, which is interviews with like 40 classical teachers. And as you read through that, you're going to find that there's a variety of opinions as well. The best resource for understanding how the respiratory system works is Respiratory Function in Singers by Thomas Hixon. And his last name is Hixon, Respiration in Singers. And in this book, he goes through the actual research, the science of respiratory function during speech and singing, and breaks it down, and then tells you what anatomical changes are happening and gives you exercises to feel those same things within your own body. Now, from that book, we learned that when you are trying to project your voice, you're usually going to sing or breathe to speak or yell or call with a larger lung volume. Having more air in your lungs is going to help you produce a louder sound. Having less air in your lungs is going to make it harder to produce a loud sound. Now, that's looking at it from a classical point of view, right? Because in classical, we're always thinking project the voice, project the voice, project the voice. But here's the thing. There's an answer in there about breathy singing. You just have to flip the words, flip the thought process. If you have more air in your lungs, your voice is going to be louder, which means it's going to be harder to sing breathy. If you have less air in your lungs, you're going to have less pressure, which is going to make it easier to sing breathy. So it's just the opposite. So that's what ends up happening when we're transitioning from this acoustically projected singing to more of a microphone-based singing approach, is we have to rethink how that air functions and what its purpose is. In projected singing, you will often use abdominal contraction to either accelerate airflow or increase pressure underneath the vocal folds to get the ring in your voice or to loft a high note. Well, in CCM styles, if you're singing breathy, you don't want that abdominal contraction. It's going to blow too much air out through your voice, and it's not going to give you the sound you're looking for. Breathy singing is usually used when somebody's in a lower emotional state of being, when like they're desperate or they're sad or they're depressed or they're trying to be tender or caring in an intimate setting. And our voice drops like this in those settings. So we don't want to come in singing with a lot of power behind our breathiness. Because if we do that, that's actually going to be counterproductive. And we're going to talk about that to answer another question here in about 5 minutes. But on this one, we also then, if we think that the difference between abdominal contraction and how much air you have in your lungs, well, that's going to also have a play at what your rib cage does. Whereas in classical singing, we often focus a lot of attention on resisting the collapse to try to sustain long legato lines. If you're in a speech-like song, something like Ed Sheeran's Don't, you don't need to worry about abdominal expansion because you're doing really quick phrases. I met this girl late last year. That's a very small phrase. You don't need a whole lot of breath to do that. So you're going to make those adaptations as well. Now, when you're talking about musical theater singing, it's a little bit different because some musical theater styles are written for acoustic settings, and that's basically anything written before 1981. In Cats, which was the big Broadway musical in 1981, it was the first musical to have a microphone on every single person on the stage. And once you start going down that road of amplifying everyone on a theater stage, vocal acoustic projection starts to matter less and less. When musical theater started, it was just like opera. You had to project, no microphone. As microphone technology became available, they started to put area mics where they hang mics, so they put mics down near the floor of the stage, and that would help project the singer's voices, enhancing it just a little bit. But in those days, those singers still had to project their voice, so that microphone wouldn't have anything to pick up. But once you get body mics on the singers, we can then start taking some liberties. And then when you get the microphone up on their forehead or down here near the edge of their mouth, like we see starting with Rent and a lot of the other rock shows that are coming and pop-based shows around that time. There's some before Rent as well, but before Rent and definitely after Rent till today. Well, when the mic's that close to your mouth, you don't really have to project at all. You can whisper sing, and it can be picked up. Now, we don't want to whisper sing everything, so that's why we got to have the belt quality or the more speech-like mix quality available to us as well. But my point is that, you know, once you get everything amplified, even in theater music, again, we don't need to breathe the same as we do for classical singing. And sometimes the one thing is you are going to find is in more of those acoustic-based singing styles. So I'm thinking, or within musical theater, so I'm thinking like Carousel, Rodgers and Hammerstein. If you're doing Rodgers and Hammerstein, yeah, you are going to be going for more of an operatically influenced sound. And some musical theater performers can do that operatically influenced sound as well as a pop rock sound. Some specialize in just one or the other, and there's no wrong answer on that. There's work just specializing in contemporary musical theater. There's work specializing in more golden age styles, and there's work in being a hybrid singer who can kind of handle both of it. So it really comes down to your taste and what you are looking for as an artist. Take our next question, comes from Jackson. My voice sounds harsh when singing pop rock. What am I doing wrong? Well, I don't know, Jackson, because I don't have a chance to hear you. And it's really hard to answer some of these questions without hearing a recording. But since you asked this as part of our, classical singing crossing over to, pop rock series this week, I'm assuming you're a classical singer. And what I know about a lot of classical singers, so I think you put in here that you were a tenor, is that tenors, baritones, they end up really putting a lot of what we call squealo into the sound when singing classically. And it's that sound that they get all the way up to those high notes. That I can't do it today, but not that sound. That sounds bad. That's me trying to be a tenor. But that kind of like hooked sound that you'll hear on opera recordings. Okay, so when they're doing that sound, go listen to the opera recordings. When they're doing that sound with that squealo, and then they try to keep that squealo over in pop rock and put it on a microphone, that's when they really start to sound harsh. So that was my take on this question. And if I'm wrong, shoot us a message, and especially with some examples of the classical singing and your pop rock singing, and we can clarify for you. But yeah, so if your voice is sounding harsh, my guess is that you're using that same squealo in your voice with the microphone. And that microphone, most handheld mics boost that squealo zone of your voice, that 3,000 hertz, 2.5, 3,000 hertz range. They boost that amplitude of that signal by as much as 7 decibels, which means your voice is, the squealo of your voice is at least twice as loud as normal because of that microphone. And it can get to the point that the squealo of your voice is actually louder than the pitch of the fundamental that you're singing. And that just sounds horrible. It's real screechy and nasty. So what I want you to do is to play around with taking away that placement, taking away that squeal. So going from ah to ah. So instead of singing Amazing Grace and really try to put that ah inside of it, you want to back off. Amazing Grace. I'm not putting that same grace inside of it, right? Just removing that little bit of a squealo can be enough to tame down the signal that's going into the microphone. Now, one of the other things I would do is then also create a little distance between you and the microphone. Now, on those handheld microphones, they do have something called the proximity effect. And what the proximity effect is it tells us how the bass response of the microphone changes with distance. When the microphone is close to your mouth, it's going to actually boost some of the lower frequencies. And when you get to about 4 inches, it starts not having much effect on the lower bass frequencies. And then once you get past 4 inches, it actually starts to decrease the volume of those bass frequencies, and your voice will get tinny. So we got to watch and probably usually go around that 4 inches point to maybe 2 inches. And then once you get that microphone set in that 2 inches and you back off some of that squealo, see if the harshness doesn't go away. If it still doesn't, you can turn down the treble on the soundboard. If you turn down the treble a little bit, that might help compensate, right? We said the mic has a boost that's already in it. So if you turn down the treble, you kind of neutralize that boost a little bit. And if you're still not happy with the sound, imagine that you're putting more exhale through it. So instead of me, getting me. So that little extra breathiness that takes away that squeal, away that in your voice should make that mic a little bit more responsive to your singing. And the output, and the end result should be that it sounds a little less harsh. All right. And also know that if you ever go to a recording studio, they have all kinds of tools and tricks that they can use. There's actually a thing that they call, multi-band compression. And in multi-band compression, you can actually single out the frequencies that you are going to be peaking on, right? So if you know that as a singer, it's this set of frequencies that tends to overblow everything, you can actually put a compressor, which helps you control the volume level or the amplitude of just those frequencies. Usually we use compression to control the amplitude variations of the entire vocal line. But with multi-band compression, you can pick just a specific set of frequencies and compress that and squeeze that down. And when you do, it can take away some of that harshness and smooth out a voice. And this is used very frequently in a recording studio. So, that's why I say rock voices vary. There are some voices out there that do have a lot of squeal, that have a lot of power. I'm sure somebody out there is watching and saying, yeah, but there's so-and-so who was trained as an opera singer. And you're right, there's singers out there like that. But they also, sometimes are freaks. They have a voice that just records really well. It's a really neat instrument. They're very unique. And they usually are, working with a professional sound team that's able to take a sound that probably sounds great acoustically in the room and make it amplify well. And if you're trying to just go this alone at home, you may not have all the equipment to do that. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. Remember, if you're watching tonight and you have questions of your own, you can drop them into the chat. We do try to grab questions every night when we're going live. Now, this I thought was an interesting follow-up to Jackson's question. This comes from Katrina, who says, how do I get that Billie Eilish sound? And so the Billie Eilish sound, I'm thinking, has a lot of quirks to it, and it has a lot of breathiness to it, as well as her full sound. So going back here to something we've touched on throughout the night, let's start, Katrina, with breathiness. A lot of times when classical singers try to sing breathy, they try to blow a lot of air through it, or they try to squeeze it quiet. So I either hear mama of them overblowing, or I hear mama of them holding back. We want to split the difference between those two and find the middle ground. So the middle ground is a place where air is flowing freely from the throat. It's not being held back, but you're not blowing it through the throat. So if held back is mama, blowing it through is mama. The middle is mama who bore me, mama who gave me. It's that middle ground. And that sound is going to change in quality the further you get from the mic. So back here, amazing grace, is going to sound a lot different than if I get right up on the mic. Amazing grace. It sounds differently with the amplification. So this is also a skill you're going to want to work on with amplification and not just acoustically in your room. Now, as you're trying to find that balance of sound, one of the things that can help is do a little alternate practice at your vocal fold level. So I want you to put fingers here on the side of your larynx and go, gook, gook, gook. And that's the feeling of everything clenching in. And then I want you to go, ha, ha, ha. That's the feeling of things opening up. We don't want to go all the way to ha, ha, ha. But the sensation should have more ha qualities in it than good qualities. If you're getting a lot of good qualities, you're going to have to really spend some time getting all of the extrinsic muscles, the muscles in your neck, to let go. So it's just your vocal folds doing the work. Now, for the quirks and the other little things that are in Billie Eilish's voice, first of all, just start and imitate. By imitating and playing around, let your ear lead the way. And as you do, which I think is the key for a lot of classical singers, It's just this little extra add-on to just go imitate. While you do, don't try to make pretty sounds, right? The name that is constantly used for classical voice training is bel canto. And bel canto literally means beautiful singing. And you've been taught for years that you want to always be singing with your bel canto, your beautiful singing. But here's the thing, not all songs are pretty, right? Not all songs are beautiful. You Should See Me in a Crown is not beautiful. It's artistic and it's awesome, but it's not beautiful. When the Party's Over, definitely not a beautiful story. It's a story about being in like this awful place in a relationship, right? You don't need beautiful singing to convey that. You need emotionally connected singing. And in that moment, like in the beginning of When the Party's Over, don't you know I'm no good for you? You want to allow your voice to not only take on the breathiness, but the loss of diction. You see, when you're in a lower emotional state of being, when you're speaking, like if you're in a place of tenderness, trying to get a baby to go to sleep, or if you're really sad and you're trying to tell your friend about this breakup that just happened, unless you're sobbing, but if you're just, trying to talk through it and you're not sobbing, your diction lessens because you're struggling to say the words. Or in the case of tenderness, you don't want to startle the infant or startle the person that you're having a close conversation with. And we instinctually know that. And so many times opera singers, because they were trained to get their diction right, to get their breath right, to get their placement right, all these other things right, all of a sudden when they come over to try to do this, they start having major judgment and they start sitting back and going, oh, but does that sound good? Or is that okay? Or am I doing that right? And a lot of times they are. And it's letting go. I had a client this week I was working on this with. The person's got a doctorate in classical singing and was told throughout their college degree that they couldn't sing rock music. And now this person is singing rock music and pop music professionally. They're part of a group where they were already doing classical stuff and they have opportunities to do the pop rock stuff, and now they're starting to do that as well. And really successfully. The other day this person sang a song for me and it was awesome. And it just goes to show that yes, anybody can learn to do this, no matter how long you've been doing it. But it's been a journey for this client to let go of that desire to try to control things, to let go of that desire to always sound good, to let go of that desire to label it and know that you got it right, right? This person wants to say this is a this mix or a this mix. And I understand that desire. And I will talk in those terms if they're helpful to somebody. But once they become not helpful, we got to get away from the things. We don't want you tied in a knot. But what I was saying to this client is I said, in the classical world, that was really helpful pre-internet when you in the 1800s had to send letters to find out if there was a singer in another city who could be in your production. And if you had a very specific baritone type in mind, you could say something like a lyric baritone or a held in baritone or a cavalier baritone, and they would know exactly what you were talking about. But we don't do that today, right? They do it a little bit in the classical world, but we definitely don't do it in contemporary commercial styles, right? In commercial styles, we want the authentic singer to come into the picture. So as you start playing around with sounds, Katrina, don't try to get a sound that you think you're supposed to have. Don't try to get it right. Just experiment. Learn what your voice can do. Learn all the different sounds you're capable of making. And try not only Billie Eilish, but try some other artists as well. And as you are playing around with all those different sounds, you'll start to find these little moments that things shimmer, that all of a sudden you're like, wow, that felt good. And I like the way that sounded. And if you're recording yourself, you'll listen back and go, yeah, that's what I want. Then that's the sound for you. And when you find that, you get to determine how you describe it. Is that a sensation to you? Is it a color to you? Do you know certain terms like head mix, and head mix makes sense to you? Do you know how the vocal folds work and you're saying, that's light closure, and that makes sense to you? Whatever it is, if it works for you, then that's what you go with, okay? And if you do this, what I'm saying, just letting go, being free, and going on to explore, I think you're going to easily find a lot of those sounds that Billie Eilish has, right? Just let your diction fall apart, give into the emotion of the song, and just be a real person telling a story on pitch. All right, our last question of the night. Let's check the chat here real quick. To let go of the need to project, rely on the mic. Yes, thank you, Edri. Let the microphone help you out. The microphone is your friend. It's part of your instrument. It's an extension of your instrument. All right, the last question tonight comes from Winnie. Is posture the same for all styles? Depends. So there are all kinds of different ways to talk about posture and alignment. Really, what it comes down to, I believe the body mapping philosophy most aligns with my teaching, and I think it makes the most sense. Coming from the body mapping world, what they talk a lot about is how the body is designed. And we know that, for instance, the foot has 3 bones that contact the ground that kind of act as a tripod that balance every other bone above your body. And we know that the leg bones need to align in a very specific way in their connection with your ankles and their connection with the pelvis in order for you to remain upright. And we know that if you start to bend those knees in the wrong direction, muscles in your legs will try to compensate to hold you upright. Physical therapists are there to help fix that when that happens. We know then that the pelvis is basically a bridge that takes the upper body weight and then divides it between the 2 legs. And that pelvic girdle has a connection to the spine that goes all the way up to your head. Your head has to balance on the top of that spine, and then your thoracic vertebrae that are underneath have to be the connection point so the cervical vertebrae of your neck can connect, and then that all goes down to your lower back. See, it's all interconnected, right? And if you have those bones resting on top of each other in a nice, freely balanced position, then that kind of alignment control is probably going to give you a lot of freedom to do a lot of things that you want to do. Because when you have posture with freedom, you can lift your neck when you need to lift it. You're not stuck. You can also, turn your head and rock out, do whatever you want, act in the thing, whatever. You can sit down at a piano and in the breathy sections, let your posture collapse and play, because when you're singing breathy, you don't need any good breath control. You just got to sing. And then you can bring yourself upright when you really got to let it rip, right? You can do whatever you want, and once you know how to balance your body out. But if you come from one of these points of view on posture of where you have to stand up with like plumb line posture, where you're supposed to keep your ear lined up with your shoulder, lined up with your hips, with your knees, with your ankles, you can end up getting really stiff and tucking your chin down to the point that it holds your larynx down, and it maybe gives you a sound that you like in your classical singing, but over in your CCM styles, it's actually locking you. And a lot of singers who will take an approach like that end up so stiff trying to hold that upright approach, they develop a whole lot of other tensions that they learn to deal with in their classical singing, but when they come over into breathy or light or speech-based singing, they really struggle because all those tensions just get in the way and lock up the whole voice. So, if you're going for something that's free and balanced, like body mapping, and there's great people I've seen from work from Alexander Technique and Feldenkrais Technique that get people, really nicely aligned and free inside of their body. But anything that gets you to know how that body works and moves, then it is the same for all styles, because what I mean by that is it's adjustable. You can go up to your really nice height and aligned place because you can make that adjustment for your classical singing, or you can collapse and sing a really sad song on the piano. And you're just shifting the alignment of the parts of your postural bones, the skeleton, the structure of your instrument. But if we're talking about one rigid position that you hold on to and think that you have to maintain to sing your tone, then no, it's not the same for all styles. Some singers may have a lot of luck with that in classical, but 90% of the time it's going to get in your way in CCM and musical theater styles. All right, so that covers everything for the night. Jordan said the general topic for today has been something I really need to learn about. This is great. Thank you. You're welcome. I'm glad you could stop by and check in. If this is something that's interesting to you and you haven't heard somebody talk about the voice this way before, I want to tell you about our special course, How the Voice Works. This is a course I filmed out in LA. It's all shot in 4K, has a 100-page workbook full of worksheets and extra reading for you. It's got 150 exercises for you to work with. It's on a pre-launch special right now of only $47. That price is about to go up. We're working with a agency right now, and we've got some exciting things coming along. And as those things come along, we are going to probably end up having to raise the price a little bit. So if you want to jump in and get this early bird special of $47, we don't have a definite date, but I can tell you it's not going to last much longer. And the other course you might want to check out is Singing with Style. And this class is all about helping you figure out how to get your voice to respond to different styles. And it all goes back to storytelling. So in this course, I tell you the different sounds that people are capable of making. We connect those sounds to emotions and to storytelling. I show you some storytelling exercises that you can use, and then we can merge those sounds with that. We show you how to really dig into using rhythm, how to dig into playing around with the notes that are there, what are passing tones and things like that you can add little licks with. It's a great course. And this is also on a special deal, but you can jump on over, check both of them out. There's a free webinar if you want to learn more. And, again, they're going to be on. Oh, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, Kelly, I know she's enjoyed the course as well. I appreciate that. Yeah, we've been getting a lot of great feedback on it. We've put a lot of work into it. There's a lot of great additional resources. I've got all kinds of videos in there, guided videos. It's worth taking a look. I think it's a great deal. It's jam-packed full of things that you can use on your own to improve your own singing voice, improve your knowledge of the singing voice and how it works from the comfort of your own home. So thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. Always great to have you here. If you have any topics you'd like to see us cover, you can either pop them down in the chat below or send us a message through Facebook or through our website, voicelessons.com. And be sure to mark this down on your calendar. If you enjoyed tonight's show, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, every Thursday night over here on the voicelessons.com Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and also streaming onto Twitch. All right, everyone, have a great night and an awesome week of singing.